This is the SMSL Raw MD1. It's a DAC and a headphone amp, but today's video is going to be a little bit different. Today's video is going to be talking about why modern DACs are failing us, the audiophile, the hi-fi enthusiast. Why at this point we just have too many. But there's one simple thing that these devices could do that would make them nearly perfect. So sit down, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk about why modern DACs are failing us. Saying that modern DACs are failing us may be a little bit of a leap because on the surface, these do exactly what they're supposed to do. A DAC is a digital to analog converter. So you're taking digital inputs from USB, from optical, from coaxial, from even Bluetooth, and you're changing them into an analog signal. And regardless of what some people will say, digital to analog converters do have a sound. They do make a difference in your chain, and frankly can be the most important piece of equipment in your entire system. I'm a big believer in a good DAC, and for all intents and purposes, this is a good DAC. It's actually a really good DAC, and it has a lot of functionality. On the front, you can see that this is also a headphone amp, which makes the $279 price an even better value because not only are you getting a digital to analog converter, you're also getting a headphone amp, and you're getting a remote control, which means this can be a digital preamp. And if you bear with me, I'll finally get to my point on why these devices are failing us. Not literally, they're just failing us as customers. If you're new here or if you've never subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out. I have low self-esteem. It makes me feel good about myself if you subscribe. You can take it back later. Donate your subscription today. Right down there. Click it. Thank you for watching. This DAC pretty much has everything that you want. It has LDAC Bluetooth, which means if you have a LDAC enabled phone, you can get, well, fairly good Bluetooth. But if you have an iPhone, you're not really going to be able to get the most out of the LDAC Bluetooth. It uses dual ESS 9039Q2M chips for the digital to analog conversion. It's a good chip. It's a real good chip. But there's another reason why this product is a little bit weird to me. We'll come back to that later. It has an XMOS 316 processor, all the good stuff, USB 1.1 and 2.0, so dual mode USB. And I believe it uses fairly good op amps. Very usable headphone output power, which means this is going to be able to drive just about any headphone you put on it. I think it's 2.5 watts times 2 and a 16 ohms, 1.7 watts times 2 and a 32 ohms, and I think that might be the balanced output. Regardless, you're not going to have a problem driving most headphones. Crazy measurements on this device. If you look up the signal to noise ratio, the distortion numbers, you'll see that this thing is doing everything it's supposed to be doing. And you have some good outputs on the back. You have XLR balanced outputs on the back. You have single-ended RCA outputs on the back. You have a single-ended headphone and a balanced headphone amp. And if that wasn't enough, this thing has a whole bunch more options. If you start digging into the menu, you'll see that this thing has a cacophony, a whole bunch, a myriad, a cornucopia of different sound color modes. And a sound color mode is, well, it changes how it sounds. Not only does it have like rich 1 through 3, tube 1 through 3, crystal 1 through 3, it also has standard. And then it also has a bunch of different filter roll-offs. I think 6 or 7 different filter roll-offs. So if you add those together, I'm not very good at math, it's a lot of different ways to listen to this thing. Most of the time with filter roll-off options, I don't hear a ton of difference, but with the sound color mode options, I do hear a ton of difference. I would take the 3 tube ones and just delete them if I could. Because when it comes to a DAC, I want to hear all of the music. I kind of feel like the tube 1, 2, 3 is just a way to not give you all of your music. The crystal is a little bit intense, but the rich, I like that. Rich 1, 2, and 3 kind of gives you a little bit more oomph on the bottom end, a little bit more oomph caramel in the lower mid-range. But it's cool to have the options, and if you think about it, you're getting a bunch of different ways to listen to your music. Granted, it's all a bunch of digital trickery, but just like in the Matrix, if the steak tastes good and it looks good, then does it matter that it's digital and doesn't really exist? No. My favorite DACs tend to be exactly the opposite of DACs like this. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad product, quite the opposite. I think it's a great product, but I think it does have a couple of problems. But it's not that raw MD1's fault. My favorite DACs are simply a digital to analog converter. No remote controls, no different sound color modes, fixed analog output. You put it in your system and you control volume off of a preamp or the amp itself. Products from companies like Jashelli Labs, the J2, the J3, the Daisy, Denafreps, Aries. Love those. I just like a DAC to be a DAC and to have its own flavor and to be able to say, I believe in myself. This is my flavor. And if you don't like it, well, I'm probably not the DAC for you. This one takes exactly the opposite approach. This is the DAC for everyone because it sounds so different in all of these different modes. I also like DACs with swappable op amps, and this one does not have swappable op amps. At least I don't think it does. All the research I did into it didn't show that it has swappable op amps, and I wasn't willing to unscrew this thing to see if it has swappable op amps. So I'm going to assume that it doesn't have swappable op amps. But how can I explain how it sounds when there's so many different ways that it sounds? In standard mode, I felt like sometimes it walked the line of being a little bit too intense on the top, a little bit too spicy on top. But you scroll down to rich mode and take some of that edge off of there. It gives you a little bit more body in the mid-range, a little bit more kick on the bass drum, a little bit less spice, a little bit less slice on the top end. So it sounds great. Soundstage, great. Clarity, great. Everything's great, great, great. So what's the problem? Problem number one is the SMSL DL200. The SMSL DL200 is a DAC with a headphone amp which uses the 9039 Q2M. I don't know if it's dual though, so it might just be one, but it's the same chipset. It also has a headphone amp. It also has balanced outputs. It also has LDAC Bluetooth. It also has 7 PCM filters. It also has all of the sound color modes. It's basically this DAC with only one coaxial input and only one optical input. It does have balanced outputs, but those are TRS outputs instead of XLR outputs. So functionally, it's pretty much the same DAC, except it's missing a few inputs and maybe a DAC chip. And it's coming in about $100 less at $189. And I like that thing. I thought it sounded awesome. And at the price, I thought it was awesome. This is slightly more expensive. And frankly, I think it's worth it. If you need 2 optical inputs, if you need 2 coaxial inputs, this is the one for you. It's still under $300 for all of that. And the headphone amp sounds pretty good. I listened to the new Meze 105 AER headphones coming in at $399. I love Meze headphones. This is a lot more neutral than the Meze 99 Classics. Very kind of similar to the, what is this, 109 Pro. But a lot less expensive, almost half the price of the 109 Pro. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is we've gotten to the point where there's just too many of these. Okay, we keep throwing new DAC chips inside, a few different things here and there, maybe an extra input. But since this one has 2 optical inputs, 2 coaxial inputs, USB input, I think we're missing just a couple of things that would make these products perfect. And get to the point where I think more people would be interested in these products. 1, an HDMI input for your TV, okay? 2, an analog input. We are at the point where these are simply digital preamps. What I wish is that a company would just take one little step and jump over the fence, give us an analog input, maybe two, HDMI ARC. And at that point, we're perfect. We've gotten to the point where 3, 4, 5 of these DACs are being released by SMSL, by Topping, by Duke Audio, by all of my favorite companies, and it's just too much. A lot of them measure really well. The raw MDA1 has a ton of features and sounds good. I have no idea how much it would cost to add another analog input to this. I have no idea what it would cost to include an HDMI ARC connection, but I know other products out there do it. That, in my opinion, is how they're letting us down. If you don't need an analog input, then obviously this thing's perfect. But they're giving us two opticals, they're giving us two coaxials. Why not an HDMI? Why not an analog? Because then we have the perfect product. Separate preamplifier, even if it only has one analog input. Think about what the Weem Ultra is doing, coming in at $323. That's basically what this could be doing if this had a streamer in it and an analog input. And since Weem has basically thrown the gauntlet down, I think SMSL and Topping are going to have to start doing these things to keep up. We live in a really cool time because at this point, a really good DAC on its own is not enough anymore. And something that has LDAC Bluetooth, balanced outputs, a balanced headphone amplifier, single-ended headphone amplifier, two opticals, two coaxials, just seems a little bit old-fashioned at this point. I still think it's a good product. I think it sounds good. I don't particularly love all of the different sound color modes. If you're looking at something like this but want to save some money, look at the DL200 coming in at about $100 less. If you want a for real digital preamplifier with a streamer, with bass management, with equalization, then look at the, well, Weem Ultra. If you don't need any of that, I think the SMSL Raw MD1 is really good, really fun. If this isn't the DAC for you, then you really need to check out my best DACs of 2024, best DACs and streamers of 2024. I'll put it right here, and I'll put the best amplifiers of 2024 right here. Maybe the best speakers. Thanks so much for watching.